Dan Ruck,
Here.
Jeremy Hall,
Here.
Jay Luke,
Here.
Steve Karpinski.
Here.
All 5 members are present.
Right. You want to move on the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as it's presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Aye. Carries. Our minutes from our January 8th meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion on the minutes. In favor?
Aye.
Please. All the comments. The supervisors not seated as committee members here. All right, we'll have a discussion regarding the employee handbook.
Yes, Mr. Chair, as, a couple meetings ago, the handbook was handed out for information for you guys to see as requested on that. We've had our meetings with employees, had a couple of clarifications that we have to do with it. And right now it'll be going out this week, for the employees, final electronic signature on receipt of the handbook. You know, so.
What were the corrections?
We had some inconsistencies in how payouts around retirement PTO went that we needed to clear up, where we said consecutive days in one part of the section and didn't have the word consecutive in others. It was cleanup of that sort. That's the one that immediately to mind. I could provide a redlined version of the new, if that would be helpful to the committee. But there was, to my estimation, nothing substantive that changed.
Just clarifying questions as people came in with them on how frozen sick would be paid out, could be utilized with that. That one got skipped as far as changing that language to be used for employees that have frozen sick. That was a clarification issue. Some of the other questions that came up were on PTO and how PTO can be used. Some of it was on bereavement. As you look at the bereavement leave, as we get into questions on great aunts and other things like that, just clearing up the what ifs and trying to make it clear and what would be management discretion versus very clear in the policy.
Is this open for like critique on any part of it?
If you have questions on it, we'll be gladly to answer.
So I'm wondering how many people have a signed agreement for telecommuting?
Can handle that one.
You can handle.
Yeah, so we have a form that we just finished work on. And I can't give you the exact number at this meeting, but I could do so at the next meeting. Because that will be, we'll be asking all supervisors to circulate the form to employees who have been on telecommuting agreements. You may remember that we had several different forms of those. We try to consolidate them. So that form is not, we have not put a due date on that yet because the form has been in flux, but the form is now set. So we can go ahead and do that for you for the next meeting.
Could you also add to that what departments those are in?
Absolutely.
Sure.
So.
I was also wondering, is there enough? I guess from my understanding, supervisor is kind of like the lowest level of supervision within a department. Is that the appropriate person to give the authority to approve telecommuting?
Yeah, so supervisor is just a general role. So Mo's my supervisor. We also have some job categories that are supervisor level. So it can be a little confusing about how that term is used. But for the purposes of the handbook, supervisor refers to the general role. So it's your immediate boss. And then we've got a number of checkoffs above that. So a division director has to agree to it as well as a supervisor. At the end of the day, the human resources director is the person who I'll go to say, how many people do we have with a telecommuting agreement and in what departments, and Kim, who's here, would be able to provide that to me. So there's, it's not strictly speaking at the discretion of the supervisor because there's a level of control above that with telecommuting in many of the policy, many of the procedures, I should say.
I guess when I read it, it sounded like any supervisor can approve telecommuting as the, like the intermittent use of telecommuting.
So
I
so
see
that's a
it
good
there.
distinction.
That's my concern.
Yes. Okay.
It needs to get higher than that.
So everybody's clear the difference between intermittent telecommuting and someone who's on a telecommuting plan is, I'll just use myself as an example. If for some reason Don can't be at the office on Thursday, but Don believes that he can get his work done on Thursday, then I let Mo know my rationale. He has the discretion to approve it or to not approve it. And it's memorialized so in email so that if we ever need to find out, did Don actually have approval to not be in the office on Thursday, we have that. That is at the discretion of the supervisor. So if you push it down further in the organization, you have a manager with 7 direct reports. That intermittent telecommuting does not rise up to the level of the division director, but it's also supposed to be occasional. It's not supposed to be something that happens often or all the time. And it's for the convenience of the employee and the convenience of the organization, so work can continue to get done. That's the way it is in the handbook right now.
Do we track convenience?
So,
I mean, that's a pretty wide open term.
oh, 100%. I'm not disagreeing with that. So back to my case, my convenience could be, I've got a contractor coming at 4:45 in the afternoon. I don't want to drive all the way down and drive all the way back. That would be to my convenience. The convenience to the organization is I continue to get work done. I'm not having to take PTO to do it. Now, there has to be a level of trust there. My supervisor has to believe that I'm going to get my work done when I'm not, my butt's not in my chair in my office. So 100%, that trust has to be there. And if it's not, then it's not going to work for sure.
Because I think what we run into as representing constituents is when an employee is on the intermittent situation and they're at Walmart.
Yeah.
And that comes back to one of us and says, well, I work at home, what's he doing at Walmart?
Right. And
That's where it gets gray.
Right, and those are the ones we need to know about.
Right.
Because it's supposed to be a one-off, where a scheduled remote schedule is supposed to be approved through the process and stuff and for convenience and, again, and that's where.
And I get it's a slippery slope. We run that in every business. You
Yep.
run into it and no, you're okay. Don't take PTO for that. Go ahead and finish that up. That's fine. You've got everything else done, or you came in early, you stayed late, whatever. So there's got to be some give and take to that. It's just hard when you were in an environment today where that's being challenged all over. And what are we doing to make sure we're doing it right? And I guess that's probably where the questions come.
Correct. Then the question of whether that's an exempt employee or an hourly employee,
Right.
and that's where it becomes very critical.
Right.
What's happening.
If it's, if it's not intermittent, how often is that reviewed and how difficult is it to change the agreement?
It's not at all difficult because it's at management discretion. And it's a good question about how often we should renew that, but it shouldn't be less than once a year. And in the past, we've had so many different ways of handling it that we haven't been able to say, okay, the season for remote work agreements is making it up January 1st to February 1. If you don't have your agreement in, great, good luck for you. But we're going to know every year that we're going to renew these things. So that's the plan right now is that this would be annualized.
And if the situation isn't working the way, the county would like it to, how difficult is it to change that agreement though? I mean, it seemed to me almost like we sign it and it's a contract for a year or something.
The agreement can be terminated at any time by management.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from my understanding,
Yeah, it's in the agreement.
when Malia was here, I was told that some people were hired with the condition of remote work.
That's correct.
under here on page 24, it says all employees are at-will employees. So where is the liability of us if we revoked it? I guess here it says we're all at-will employees, so.
If we had an employee that we brought in under those conditions, it's at our discretion to change it as long as they're an at-will employee.
So that's not binding.
No employee has a contract with the county except for the administrator.
Okay.
That I'm aware of. That caveat in there.
And then I guess another question I had was, so instead of employees requesting these, should these be like job-specific positions that we allow it to? You know, because if an employee requests it and we deny one employee, but we give it to another employee, are we playing favorites, or is it because one employee gets more done than another? I guess there's a little bit of,
The employee can, it comes down to operation of the county, whether whether it'll work or not, and depending on position. Some positions may work, some other positions may not, be able to. That's why the request has to be done and evaluated. So it's all based on the operation of the need of the county.
I think just understanding of what departments are utilizing it and how many there are will be helpful in us understanding, what the guideline really is. Cause read this till we're blue in the face, but you gotta apply it to a practical situation to really know whether it's
It
in the
works.
best interest of the county or not.
Right.
So we can have an agenda item for next meeting to review that.
It's one of the hottest topics that came out of this, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to our constituents.
Those are the ones, exactly.
Yeah. They're the ones that are the hottest.
All right, are we good on that till next meeting?
I got a couple other questions, actually, if you don't mind. So on page 43, we talk about take-home vehicles. It says that all take-home vehicles assigned must be reviewed annually by an appropriate governing committee. What committee is that?
So, I think the idea there is that, so take public works, so, or take highway as an example. There's, take-home vehicles by highway employees. And the idea would be that public safety, public works would review that list. And it's not that it's not important for other committees, particularly general government, to have some awareness of, and we'd be happy to provide an overall list to general government. But it just seemed like the appropriate place for the approval or the review of the take-home vehicles was at the governing committee.
Okay.
So public works would have, public works, public safety would have highway and parks. Law enforcement's exempt from this. So that's not covered in this at all. And there's only one other take-home vehicle that I'm aware of. And it's the administrator's take-home vehicle. And so general government or executive committee would review that.
And there's.
So outside of law enforcement, there's only one.
Other than public safety, public works,
Public works.
which has parks and has highway. And I will say that the departments have been willing to work. We've tightened this up a lot. And sometimes when there's change, people get grumpy. We've tightened this a lot. The record keeping has tried to keep the burden as low as possible, but it's a level of oversight the general government director has been applying across the organization. And I'd say the level of compliance has been very high. I wasn't necessarily expecting that. But we have all the documentation done for 25 now, and be happy to share that with this committee. But the specific review would be public safety, public works, for parks and highway, and then either executive or general government for the administrator's vehicle.
And then that data is broken down by like vehicle and how many miles and the cost to the county.
Depends on the position on the IRS rating on how that's done, whether it's tax per mile or it's tax per trip. And how that gets charged back, as some of those are recouped back from, like the highway commissioner's vehicle is recouped back from the state. The operations manager's vehicle at highway, that one's a 60-40 split through the state. Commissioner's vehicle is by the mile, recouped by the state that way. So it depends on the position and how that works, and how the IRS is taxed and how we tax the employee on that vehicle.
Marv?
I think I got, the only other thing I got on page 74. Talk about the email use policy. And electronic communications. I guess I would like to see like an official approved signature block from the county. So like every county employee that has outside correspondence would use a specific signature block.
I mean, the one that says signature and then the confidential, yada, this,
Yeah,
you're not bored to see
it would-
it all unless it
Well,
comes
it
from
would
the
have
center.
like the county's logo, your name and title, your position, your contact information.
Them all the same.
Yeah,
All the
so
same.
everybody's consistent. Guess that's all I have.
Hey, anybody else got anything? I see a couple of our supervisors will come in. Do they have any information for this committee? Do you want to share anything?
Possibly when you get to the, when you get to some of this other stuff here,
All right.
your financial section. The only thing I'd say about the handbook is nobody else got one. It isn't on the public record, so we don't know what you were saying.
It was on the agenda for the
It's on the
January.
agenda, but where is it? Where's the packet?
It was in the January one, when it was
Alright.
first presented. It
Okay.
was in there, it was in the
Thank you.
packet.
We can provide one to you, sir.
Oh, I'm good. He's asked the questions that I was gonna ask, so.
All right. What do we have on our Q4 payments exceeding 75,000?
Yeah, so we passed this out in January and we brought it to the meeting. Folks expressed the interest in having some time to review it. If you go to the second page, it's kind of a consolidated view where we take all the various checks, put them together so you can see what vendors were paid what overall in this fourth quarter of 2024. And then there's notes to the right of that. So if you've got questions about any of the specific projects and the overall expenses, we'd be happy to discuss those with you. If you want to talk about the more fine-grained information on the first page, that's open for discussion as well. You know, from management's perspective, there's no surprises on this list for us. If there are for you, disappointment perhaps, but not surprises. But if you've got concerns or questions, please feel free to ask.
Anybody have questions on it? How about our cash flow and depth analysis?
So there's some color enhanced PowerPoint presentations that you've got handed out to you. We'll throw this up on the screen as well. So this is a pretty coarse-grained analysis of cash flow for 2025 and into 2026. And you've seen a graph like this before. The county gets, this is for the general fund only, by the way. So the other funds in the county runs like highway are not represented here. But we get the majority of the inflow of cash into the general fund in January, then it really peters off. So our fund balance in the general fund declines over time because we get that big chunk in January. You'll see that our outflows exceed our inflows in December, which is really typical for municipalities and counties. We never dip below zero with the fund balance. Now, you will also notice that we're coming in with more money in 25 than we will be in 26. That's because we passed a deficit budget last year. 24, yeah. So we started with $3.5 million starting balance. 26 million of inflows, 27.6 million in outflows. So the ending balance of the general fund will be 2.4 million or so. So there's some wiggle room. But, we had a bunch of revenue coming in from ARPA and COVID. We've talked about how that's all gone. Want to be very careful with our budgeting for 26. I will also point out that this is a guess and it represents no information about what might happen at the federal or state level. So in the administrator's report, I believe Mo's going to discuss a couple things that we're already doing, thinking about the fact that and I think there's some discussion before the meeting about there's a lot of churn in the environment right now. And I think prudent folks will wonder what might happen to county finances if the churn at the federal level impacts the state and the churn at the state level impacts the counties. So we're paying as much attention to that as we possibly can. This is a status quo representation of cash flow. When we learn something different, we will let you know. But this is what we have right now. We can go to debt now if there's no questions about that. So back before COVID, the county had a plan to borrow $2.25 million a year for capital projects. That ARPA influx we've talked about so many times kind of took us off that plan, didn't need to borrow the money. With the 2025 budget, we've gone back to the plan, and you'll be hearing as we enter the budget process, which we're doing now, is our plan is to bond for 2026 as well. We can borrow that same amount of money, roughly to $2.25 million, essentially in perpetuity, and never get into a situation where we're exceeding the debt service that the board has asked us to maintain. So that graph here shows that we can bring in new debt service and never really exceed this line here, which is the threshold we've been trying to target. And if you go out another 5 years or so, this steady states at about here. So from, how do we get capital projects done? Our strategy right now would be to borrow money into the future for that, not exceed that debt service level of 2.2 or so. And that keeps the levy flat except for net new construction, basically. So that's the strategy that we've got.
That's the strategy, that we've come up with to keep our levy stable and flat. The new construction typically comes in about 1.34%, maybe a little higher on that. As you recall, in 2025, we were able to put this strategy and implement that, and actually our levy went down 21 cents for our county levy. So going out in the future, this is the way to keep our capital projects moving. The largest one we have coming up next year is the HVAC boiler replacement in the Justice Center buildings. That's coming in about $1.8 million right now, and it's 23 years old now. So that large one, and that gets us down the road, and subsequent years of 27, it'll be highway projects to fund those, to keep that infrastructure up to date. And so with that in place and keeping our levy stable and flat as possible, it's a great strategy to keep going. Naturally our unknowns are sales tax, and I can talk about that on how that's looking.
The other unknown is interest rates, and we're projecting right now, borrowing money at about 4.25. But we have no control over that in the future. So another guess, but if rates stay stable, that's what our borrowing will look like. Obviously, if rates go up, we borrow as much and keep just at that threshold.
Yeah.
Any questions about that?
Hey, how about our budget calendar?
This is for just for your information only. It's a document that's got a page that says situational variables. This is what we see having it, it was weeks ago now when we published this for the division directors, but that's on the revenue side, here's what we're seeing. Here's on the expense side. You'll look at the last point under revenue uncertainty. Initiatives from the executive branch of the federal government may negatively impact state revenues and in turn county revenues. Keep an eye on that. Then if you turn the page over, it's just every little thing that we need to do to get the budget in front of you for an approval in the November meeting. By the way, because of some circumstances that are beyond our control, the November meeting will be at an interesting time and date. The clerk has informed me that it needs to be, we need to have the board meeting in the afternoon on November 12th, and it must be done by 6 o'clock in the afternoon by state statute. I don't know if we put those statutes together. The clerk's just
It should be done by 5 o'clock
5 o'clock.
on Wednesday. That's in our rules of order.
I was thinking it was daylight savings time, I guess. But no, we will have, it will be an unusual date for the November board meeting and also for the public hearing for that reason as well.
Due to the reason that that board meeting falls on Veterans Day. Then our Wednesday in our rule of order, we'd put it on Wednesday, which in our rules of order cannot go past 5 PM. So hence it'll be at like 1 o'clock or something
Might have to be 9 o'clock.
in the morning.
All right, how about the financial policies?
So we have, in the January packet, in the packet for this month, you have, a draft, set of financial policies handed out. Is that same document along with a redlined version, of them, which basically takes the previous version and then, shows you in red what has changed for the financial policies. I think what we're looking for from the committee is a review of this and a discussion. Obviously, we can discuss anything you'd like to today, but begin that discussion today and carry it forward into next month if that would suit you. We'd like to understand, your thoughts on it. It's really sort of high level, 3 things that are different from the version that is redlined to the one that says draft on it. First is that we finally got around to documenting what the board had set as a threshold. 50% of the general fund must be kept for rainy days. So that had been apparently discussed and passed by the board, but never memorialized in the financial policy. So that is now memorialized. The other 2 other things, one has to do with the levels in the procurement policy. During the time we've been using the 2020 draft, or maybe even before that, the federal government changed some levels. So we had the top level for discretion was $150,000. That's now $250,000, and that's coming from the federal government. So there's a number of levels of procurement ranging from below 10,000 all the way up to over 250. So those levels are a little bit different, and partially because of the federal government, partially because that middle level was 25,000 to 50,000. We bumped it to 75,000 because so many things that we buy were just over $50,000. So trucks as an example, and putting a truck out to a time-consuming and cumbersome RFP process when we could just get quotes from vendors, operationally didn't make much sense to us. So we're suggesting that we should raise that level to $5,000. I'm forgetting what the last one was.
The other stuff was cleanup language that was carryover from administrator coordinator form of government. To clean up that type of language and get those in there on where it was unclear when it said come to the board or a committee for approval. The committees and the county board approve all major capital projects and that through the budget process. So unless there's a change in that, we'd come back to the board with a, budget amendment resolution versus, having to come to a committee for approval on that kind of thing. So we cleaned up that type of language in there and made sure that we were up to date on our state and federal, purchasing requirements, with those. And along with this, on the backside that you don't have is our procedure on going through these procurements and stuff and making sure that we have the right levels of approval, that the department heads and division directors are recognized in those procedures so that procurement staff is not something through the department head doesn't know about. So. And I believe the investment side of this has already been approved last year through general government. Yeah, last year or the year before. So there, I don't think there was any changes.
Yeah, unless you see something around the investment policy that strikes you as being a mistake, you have already approved the section on investment.
Anything else on the financial policies?
Should I bring up some of my stuff later? I'll come to the next meeting, maybe.
Bring it up.
You can bring it up now.
Well, on the management
Or
one,
with the chair.
you still have the inventory at every year instead of every other. So it's page 32 or 39, whatever. Management of county owned non-tax forfeiture. The property inventory,
Or the property inventory?
that was changed also to every other year, I thought, so it wasn't so time consuming.
What page you on, Supervisor Connell?
I am on page 32 on the top, 39 on the bottom. So it'd be chapter 5, 6, 104 report on the property. If you see that, and then like, I think on the same page at disposition of surplus, it says appraised value as determined by the county board, would that be by the general government committee instead? 05, the bottom line, there's a couple spots that says county board instead of the committee first.
Should be. That's right. That's exactly right, sir.
Okay, and then the lease payment agreements too are through your committee also, isn't it there? There's 3 places there that says county board.
Yeah.
Should be the general government committee.
Exactly.
And then at the top of the page, it's got conservation, development, recreation, education committee. That should get changed to where that in there twice.
That may be a statutory requirement. I'll have to look into that. Often in the statutes, they have specific committees designated and we absorb those committees. And for example, our environmental services committee likely acts as that committee.
It does, I think, because that's how it was.
But that should be a statutory requirement that specific committee hear that. And so that's probably why that's still there, but I can look into that.
Any other ones?
Oh, I'll go. I didn't have a red line, so I just moved my name. I'll look up some other ones.
Sweetie.
But there were some odd things in there because even in the procurement, it doesn't say what committee it goes on the 5 levels. It doesn't, it says it in our rules of order, but it doesn't say it in this part.
As far as procurement, in what fashion?
And who oversees it?
The procurements are done through the budget process.
Also, yeah, but I mean,
Anything outside the budget process then would have to be a budget amendment going to the thing, but the committees do not approve any purchases.
so there's no oversight by a committee for purchases.
The purchases are reviewed over 75,000 by general government, but it's all within the budget that's approved by the,
Okay, but if it goes outside that, it goes to, but does it comes to this committee? Does it?
if it goes
Or
outside
say
that, then
that.
we have to go through, the the oversight committee of that department that's requesting something outside of their budget, and then a general government, and then to a resolution to amend the budget to have that purchased.
Okay, it doesn't seem to state that very clearly, I guess, is to me.
Okay,
Maybe it does in the after the fact stuff, but it doesn't,
We can look at the
it kind of
budget.
bounces around.
yeah, we can look at the budget amendment language just to clarify that, so it kind of spells that out.
I had some other ones that's coming up because of, we're doing write-offs. It's got 30, 60, 90 days, but then it says only after 60 days that you do it. Collection of delinquent accounts. If not paid within 60 days, and then down here it says you have to do it 30, 60, 90. And I mean, so we're writing these things off today or whenever. Was that procedure followed? We get to that write-off. Because some of these are
What
2
page you
years
on?
old.
It's on
So what happened at the
35.
30, 60, 90 day? So that would be in your collection procedures. You know, it's got paid in full within 30 days everywhere, but then it says 60. If it isn't collected, then you do something. But I'm looking at where these non-payments are back in 22, so that's 2 years, 3 years. Was this procedure followed on those funds that we're writing off?
Yeah.
Oh,
We have a procedure to collect money. How come we're 2 years out doing it? I mean, I thought we caught up from the last time because it was $1 million. I'm wondering why the procedure, is it gonna be followed or not followed, or why is it even in here then?
I'm thinking, are you speaking of the
Golden age anywhere.
GAM, right, a couple years ago?
So
Yeah,
a couple
that-
years ago it was 1 million, now it's 54, so it's way down. But it says 30, 60, 90 days that we should be looking into this. But the dates are 2 years. It says 22 is the date.
Yeah.
So are we not following that procedure?
Sir, I'll look into it. My recollection is that there's a reason we can only go, we've got it as advanced as we can right now with GAM. But I will look into it.
But GAM is under us, so they do follow this policy supposedly. Are they aware of it?
Unless there's some agency or there's something outside of our control there because of the kind of
Okay.
business.
But do they go by our policies?
As much as possible.
Okay. So some of the other ones are that, but I mean, it's when we have so many different days and one working day, follow receipts and all this, I'm just wondering, is any of this being even followed? Do people even know about it?
Well, in the case of Golden Age Manor, I mean, you're dealing with insurance and I can tell you 30, 60, 90 days is kind of meaningless.
That's what I thought too, but I mean, we should at least know that
It's 35.
because now it's going to 2 years. I mean, that's what happened last time. We had some that were 10 years old. We're going like, how can this happen? I mean, at least it's under the $1 million now after we got blindsided by that one where it's reasonable now.
Right. I think you've got a question about whether, one, are we following this and is it practical to follow it?
Is it-
In some cases, it's.
So
clear
should it be
we're not.
reviewed and taken, so it's actually usable?
I think we'll, that I'll absolutely confirm my understanding about the GAM accounts.
Sure. I mean, that's
Particular.
just. Because if it doesn't make sense, I mean, it's. Why are we having it in there and trying to follow something that doesn't work?
Agreed.
And that's that annual review. Do we do that with the treasurer? She doesn't have to come in and do that, does she? I've never seen her do that before. A written fully itemized statement report verified by the county treasurer's oath, all monies. Boy, we don't have that, do we? At the end of the budget time, does she come in and do all that? Don't we assign that to somebody like the administrator to do it? That might be what, just that statement, because that's a lot of paperwork and headaches for somebody to try to shove down our throats and understand. That's why I said that meeting might have to start at 9 o'clock in the morning if she actually goes by that. Of course, on the end, then, do we have a inventory of all the things that are $500 or 5,000? Do we have that inventory?
That's a good question. We're really, right now, because of desire to make sure things are appropriately insured. We're going a little deeper than we've ever gone in terms of the county assets, where they are. We found that we do have some assets in places we didn't know about. And the county's had some problems in the last year. The ADRC fire would be a good example. We didn't have any of that insured because we didn't know it was happening. So that's a very fair question. I can assure you that we're more diligent than we have been in terms of understanding what we own and where it is, and then asking ourselves whether it's worth insuring. And if it is, we insure it.
About the useful life, that should almost, can that be put with procurements so that we actually see that table on that last page? What are the improvements, the years and stuff that we prove some of that when we do procurements?
We could reference it in the procurement policy.
Or maybe
And it's not-
reference it a little better so we know.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because that's done differently depending on what it's done as you go to the state, like for highway or office equipment, on what's the depreciation schedule on those equipment. Those might change or, they do change from time to time with the state and how they do those.
And these years are pretty wide open. I mean, it's 15 to 25, 10 to 35, 4 to 20, 25 to 50. But I mean, if we're buying something for 50 years and it wears out 23 and borrowing for that, we're paying for it twice or 3 times.
Yeah,
So I mean, just for reference, so that we at least start with that or something, so that we understand that better.
Yeah, as a plow truck, they depreciate a plow truck for 10 years on the state level.
So you don't get
Now
it
we're
20
almost
years.
370,000. So you hit the ground running at 30,000 in the hole. But once it's depreciated fully, it finally starts making money at that 11-year mark. So
Right, anything else on the financial policy? If not,
Oh, I do have one more. I'm sorry. What is standard operating procedure from the Department of Administration? Under standard protocol, standard operating procedure, SOP, for page 21. B, what is standard operating procedure? I guess it says to get it from you, so I'm wondering, can I get that from you?
Page 21.
21 on the bottom, 14 on the top. Under section 4, standard procurement. It says for all level of expenses below. I can get the document from you. Can I get a document like that?
it's the procedure for procurement.
Yeah, so we have
Yeah.
SOPs that are waiting to be published based on the approval of the levels, because the levels have changed. But we can circulate the SOPs to you now. The levels won't match what's in this document right now, though.
So they won't match, so it wouldn't be worth it.
Well, no, it is you can see what we're asking folks to do. It's just that we're asking for a level change here, so the current SOPs reference the levels in the old document, but everything,
So you have. to
logically,
rewrite
it all works the same way.
That's gonna be wrote
Correct.
to match.
Absolutely so.
All right.
So that every department purchases the same way and requires the same documentation for each level
Okay.
and what their process is to get it through and put it through press service.
I just never seen one of those.
Being a contract or a.
Let's see what it was. Okay.
Possible that they didn't exist until recently.
It's the first time I seen it in writing, so that's what I'm asking.
all right, how about a review of the services provided by employee-owned firms?
Yes, there is a memorandum. I'm struggling to find, oh, here it is. This one page. This is just to inform the committee that we do have situations where the county contracts with a business owned by an employee. There are certain stipulations in statute about, what's allowable and what's not. One of the stipulations is level of expense, and the county spend more than $15,000 a year with an employee-owned firm. And what we've got here is just at the very bottom, a list of what's been spent by law enforcement with this individual who is a jailer. what he does is he decals the squads when they come in. And we don't have another place to get this done. So it's legitimate in terms of the need. And it is not in excess of what's stated in statute, but it is our job to inform you of it. So we're doing that.
Everyone done is sent out in a memorandum like that? Everyone that's being utilized, or is this something new?
It is something new that we should have been doing. And that's why you'll see that there are 3 years reported here.
Yep.
And the way this works practically is we ask department heads and division directors to let us know. You know, we see invoices come in for Fred's decal shop. We don't know if Fred is an employee or not. So this is the best we can do to inform the committee, and we'll do it each year from now on. So
This came up before, but
it's just been a while. I think 2018 was the last time it was done. Am I remembering that?
wow.
Maybe even before that.
We just want to be transparent on what's happening.
All right, we got a resolution 625 to authorize cancellation of outstanding orders.
So this is something that we, supervisor not seated has pointed out. We, this is one of the things we do every year. If you'll, it's on page 47 of your packet. These are just checks that we've written that haven't been cashed. We are allowed to now cancel those. Total $628.75.
Sure, we're talking about the same one here.
You're talking about cancellation of orders? Or did I get out of order?
And then the resolution is on page 48.
We're on resolution 25.
Yeah, so there's. Yeah, so, yeah, so that list is associated with that resolution, that $600 or so. Next one is the GAM write-off, which I think the supervisor was referring to.
You need a motion to approve resolution.
No, we gotta move it to the county board, either with the recommendation or not.
I'll make a motion to move it to the county board with recommendation.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried. No resolution 725. Right off the uncollectible accounts receivable, gold making number.
Right, so this is, obviously a more sizable amount, $52,197.06. And this is the sort of thing that we caught up on a few years ago. But we're as close to as we can be. It's my understanding from talking with Dana and others that, we're as caught up as we can be with these. So we've got the oldest one, looks like it's 2022 here. We're looking for your approval on this.
Same thing, we need a motion to move it.
I'll make a motion to,
With or without a recommendation.
with recommendation.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. All right, how about resolution 3523?
Yeah, I'll ask a question on this one. This was the housing grant that we were looking at. A municipality had a request for a broadband project on getting a loan. And we came to the committee to ask, the best resource of doing that was amending this resolution to also allow some broadband projects, with that at 25,000. Since then, the municipality has, pulled out and doesn't want the loan anymore for broadband. So at that time, the committee said, yes, go ahead, amend the resolution. Now that the municipality has dropped off. The question is, do you still want us to amend the resolution to add broadband or just wait for another project and keep it as housing?
I'd rather keep it as housing.
I would agree with that.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'd rather keep it as housing projects.
Broadband has got a lot of other places to search for money other than a project like this, and I think this was originally designed for housing, so my opinion would be to keep it as housing.
And that's great. I mean, if we have a consensus, then we'll just leave it as is.
I don't think anybody else is gonna come forward and request broadband.
Either.
That's where this money came from. What's the broadband? No, nobody's used it.
I would suggest a motion directing staff to take no further action, since a motion was made directing staff to draft a resolution. Just a motion basically directing staff to take that order. Take no further action on drafting a new resolution would be my suggestion.
I'll move that, or that staff be directed to take no further action on advancing that.
Second that.
Discussion? Not all those in favor?
Aye.
What does that do to resolution 3523? It goes away?
It stays as is.
We don't need to do anything more on it?
No, sir.
All right, how about the administrator's update?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we continue to watch sales tax. Sales tax in, January was up 87.6%, very high in January. In February, we're still 10% above what we took in, year to date from 2024. However, we're watching it as February's, sales tax was down 30%. So eagerly waiting on what March is gonna do to see what's happening with that. We also are continuing to watch executive orders with that and how that'll affect our funding. Implemented a slowdown on hiring process by 3 months on open positions to reevaluate to see the need of those. Looking at those, I've asked Don to look at budget modeling. He's done that with the debt service and the cash flows, and continue to do that with looking how we're doing it. One of the unknowns we have is Medicaid. Naturally, Medicaid is 1 in 3 children in Wisconsin are covered by Medicaid and 1 in 6 adults are covered by Medicaid. One thing we have going for us is we are not a Medicaid enhanced state. We're one of 10 states that didn't go into that program, enhanced in it. So our cuts may be less than other states, depending on what happens at that level. We're working on the financial policy and already the budget for 2026. The county audit is currently in progress. They were already down at Golden Age Manor. This week they're at Highway, slowly making our way to the government center here to see where we land in from 2024. Nicole Rosso is taking over as the ADRC director from Laura Nevy, who is retiring this month. So thank her for what she's done. March 7th, Judge Tolan did his final CJC treatment court. I want to thank Judge Tolan for all he's done for treatment court the last 8 years. Judge Anderson will now be taking over treatment court with that. The museum board had informed me that Larry Stemick has passed away. He was a key member on the board. Brian brought this to my attention. Just want to recognize him also. The grandstand, we're still on track to go out for bids in the next few weeks on that. We've had meetings with the fairgrounds and Rod Polk on nailing down the bid documents on those. However, we're still waiting on a business plan from the Fair Society for 2025. So until I get that, we will not award bids. So still waiting on those. We did get a letter from Governor Evers on the block grants, the LFR funds. I have that letter here. Those are municipal block grant funds that some municipalities are holding. The state wants those back to consolidate those into a new program that'll go for updating vacant buildings for low-income housing. Not sure how that affects our county yet or what municipalities are sitting on these funds. But the state wants them back to realign those with something else. So, there's meetings coming up in April on that. Staff will be going to those as well as Supervisor Duncanson that sits on that board will be sitting in on that virtually, so. And that's all I have right now, unless you have questions.
Anybody? All right, how about our work plan? Subject matters for the next meeting.
We'll have the remote work number and by department. The email signature block on there. We'll have the financial policies back on there, for discussion and review.
We also get a review of the resolution we approved for the zoning position last year. And an update on the cost to the county for that position. And how it's,
What's been recovered?
how it's cost neutral.
They contract. Okay. And see how the compliance is how many compliance, what's come into compliance, what had court action and what has the outstanding one still.
Well, originally the discussion was that would be a self-funding position, so let's try to understand how much funding we gain from.
Okay.
Is that,
Anything else? Okay, we got one item to go on.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Favor?
All right.
Aye.
9.
27.